Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the first episode of ENGAGE Dialogue. I'm Charabot Chot. I am ENGAGE Project Manager of Sustainable Development Cluster, and it is my great honor to be moderating today's dialogue. The Think Next, Acts Next, the next generation ENGAGE ASEAN Think Tank Dialogue, that we can call in short ENGAGE, is 2-year actions proposed by the consortium of the Conrad Adina System and the Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam and the Asian Vision Institute funded by European Union. By December 2022, ENGAGE aims to contribute to better awareness of EU foreign policy objective and its engagement in the Asian regions, leading to the higher interest in the latter strategic cooperations with the EU in the area of security, connectivity, and sustainable development. The STEM fellows who are currently engaging in the research for each of the 3 areas have been selected from both the EU and Asian regions. In addition to their contribution to this project, they are working with the public, private, academic, and non-governmental institutions. By working in research groups, they are to write a total of 35 research papers on a key topic that are direct interest to the current and the next generation of policymakers. And ENGAGE, we have created ENGAGE Dialogue, which aims to promote awareness among national and international stakeholders about ENGAGE while promoting the visibility of EU contribution to the ASEAN and EU partnership, and we aim to share insight and perspective of ENGAGE Fellow. Today, we're going to talk about how can citizens be effectively engaged in developing smarter and more sustainable city. With me in these discussions, I have Nadina Arkop, a research fellow in the Global Governance, Regulation, Innovation, and Digital Economy unit at the Center for European Policy Study, Belgium. And she also is an engaged fellow of Sustainable Development Cluster, join me from the Belgium. Thank you, Nadina, for joining with me. And I'm here from Cambodia.
Thank you, Ravut, and good afternoon or good evening, wherever our listeners may be. It's a pleasure to be here today.
And I know that in Europe time is afternoon time, and good afternoon to you, Nadina, and good evening to all the audience watching us from the streamline in ASEAN. So since I have mentioned that this week, like today, we're going to talk about a smart city, I would like to ask you the first question. Nadina, may you share about the definition? What is a smart city?
Indeed, thank you very much, Ravut. Smart cities can be conceived in different ways, and there can be many definitions that one can put forward. But one simple way to think about it is that the smart city is a concept of urban transformation in which the emphasis is put on how we can tap the potential of new technologies and innovation to unleash more opportunities for all citizens, for ourselves, for all citizens, of course, improve quality of life, and while doing this, also render our cities more sustainable. In this definition, tapping the potential of new technologies and innovation can mean different things, and there are 3 main dimensions that are important to this. There's the economic dimension, the social, and the environmental dimension. Now, when it comes to the economy, this means using technologies to make our cities thrive, be more competitive, and drive growth. The social dimension refers to the fact that, by implementing solutions for smart cities, we can improve citizen well-being, provide better public services, and provide better for fundamental needs of citizens. And finally, together with this economic and social dimension, we have, of course, the environmental dimension, which is becoming much more important with every day that passes by. And environmental dimension means that we have to do all of these things while making sure that we reduce the impact on the environment, we improve our energy efficiency, and so on and so forth. So this is just some food for thought to start of our discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Nadina. So back to a little bit more about smart city. I think it's really important about especially to developing country. But why smart cities matter, and what the challenges are in the way of smart city?
Oh, indeed, challenges abound, and it's true that they also differ depending on where on the globe we might be. But some of the key challenges include rapid population growth, demographic change, climate change, finding a way to manage resources efficiently. For instance, for the case of the EU, demographic change is one key component, since a lot of our societies are experiencing this change towards an aging population. Conversely, in ASEAN, for instance, population is expected to grow even more over the coming years. And this all comes into the general trend that we see globally of urbanization increasing. So at this stage, around 56% of the world population lives in cities. By 2050, this percentage will get to 75%. So that means that this obviously making sure that our cities are prepared for that transition is crucial. Focusing, for instance, on the ASEAN case, this percentage will go from 47% more or less now of people living in cities to 65% in 2050. So there's definitely a lot of scope to focus on smart cities and try to improve the way we do things. Now, I'd like to mention one more thing, and then I will pass it back to you. I think beyond these big trends that we see right now that I mentioned, of climate change, demographic changes, COVID-19 has also shown vulnerabilities that our cities face. All these highly interconnected cities do indeed drive growth and help unleash opportunities, but they are also vulnerable. Think, for instance, of how vibrant cities came to a standstill during the pandemic. And in some parts of the world, we've also witnessed at least temporary migration from big cities towards suburban areas or rural areas even, to escape the challenges that interconnectedness posed within the context of a pandemic. Now, this is perhaps a temporary change, but how will this affect the way we think of cities in the future? And how will this affect the way we think of our basic needs? Perhaps we need to find a better solution to provide for more space and more, provide better for the main needs that citizens feel that are very important.
Yeah, Nadina, like since you mentioned about the pandemic, I think it's really hard to manage, and also it's not really affect to the smart city. But however, like, may you clarify a little bit more, like which one that is more challenging, especially during the pandemic, and how can the citizens, like, they can prepare or they can take to learn about this thing to prevent?
Oh, so the main challenges related to the pandemic, that's well, I think that's a very difficult, let's say, problem to pinpoint individually. What I think is very important in the context of cities, we have come to think of them as a place where people find most opportunities for jobs, right? So that's also why we've seen this drive towards more cities, towards greater urbanization. What has happened with COVID, at least in some parts of the world, and it depends also on the economic mix of each individual region, but one trend that we have seen is the fact that we now realize that working from home, for instance, in the service industry, is something very much real and very much possible. We have experienced it for over a year and a half in quite a few countries. So perhaps this is one key challenge to understand. Now that we know that working from home, for instance, is possible, what changes can we make in our cities to accommodate this? Perhaps the commute is no longer that feasible for a lot of people. And we can think of reorganizing our living spaces and working spaces in such a way that better meets also this need for combining a more flexible working arrangement, of course, in those industries where this allows for such a change.
Thank you, Nadina. I think, like you have mentioned, is really important, especially not just in terms of the one country, but it's, all around the world, because all the countries, they are facing about the pandemic and they need to work from home. Sometimes, like we are like same as us, like we have like for dialogue actually, like through the online. Thank you, Nadina. My next question to you, talking about the EU and ASEAN cooperations. So how can the EU and ASEAN, they work together to implement the smart city?
I think here there's a lot to learn from each other, and it's something that I mentioned perhaps earlier. There are a lot of differences between regions on how on the needs, on specific needs to develop smart cities and to develop specific solutions for smart cities. Now, a cooperation within a framework such as this between EU and ASEAN can really help reinforce key learnings that each region makes individually. So I think that's where the main advantage lies in this sort of cooperation. Exchanging best practices and also exchanging experience is crucial to make sure that, well, mistakes are not repeated. And that we can invest in those solutions that really work. Now, what I find very interesting is that in ASEAN, there has been this recent new project on smart green ASEAN cities to support development of ASEAN cities, of smart cities in the ASEAN region. The EU is supporting this initiative as well. Also from our side, from the EU, we've had within the EU several initiatives to try to support not only the development of the usual suspects in terms of smart cities, which is usually capitals, so really further development capitals. What we have been trying to do in the EU is to look also more at the regional level. So trying to go beyond developing just the capitals themselves and looking into how we can support development of more cities through smart city initiatives.
Okay, so for the next question, I'm talking about the future a little bit. We kind of like skip to the future because I think like currently during the pandemic, I think it's really hard for us to working on this. And may I ask you how can the future smart city not only be smart but also the sustainable and resilient?
That's indeed, I think, the key question. And I think from my perspective, what is most important is to ensure that these three components I mentioned in the beginning, the economic, the social, and environmental component that go into creating smart cities are harmoniously considered. And taking maybe a look at the broader picture of what sustainability is, I would call it the long-term mindset. There is a very, very interesting example of how we can visualize sustainable development. In a recent book by Kate Raworth, an economist who wrote a book called Donut Economics, she came up with this very simple and also playful way of visualizing what sustainable development is. And she says essentially that sustainable development is like a donut. So if you consider, you have a donut in front of you, there are two boundaries to that. One boundary is the social boundary of donut, and that defines essentially what are the main basic needs for our lives and for our society. And this can go from food and health to peace and rights. Now, we want to make sure that all our needs are fulfilled, but in this donut concept, there's also an outer boundary, which is represented by what our planet in the end can do, the environmental boundary, so to say. And going beyond this external boundary would mean passing a tipping point in environmental degradation. And in this metaphor, the key is to find the right balance between making sure that our needs are met without going beyond the external boundary of what the planet can support. So I think for the future and putting smart cities within this metaphor, the key is to make sure that we hit this balance right.
Thank you, Nalina, for the good example about the donut. I think it's good to remember about how the boundary between like up and down, and we can see this the donut, and we can take as a real example that happening on the globe. And my question to you: how can we be an effective part of the solution, especially for the citizens? How can the citizen be encouraged to take an active role in building the smarter and more sustainable of the tomorrow? Yeah.
Thank you for this question. Indeed, that's also, I think, the direction in which we should be thinking, because in the end, also our individual actions contribute to what our future would look like. Now, the good thing from my perspective is that awareness has been building about the importance of sustainability. It's not just a remote topic anymore, but it's something that is slowly becoming more and more ingrained in our day-to-day lives. And this also applies for what we can do to make our cities smarter and more resilient. Now, to give just a very personal example, maybe that people might be able to relate to, and speaking also as a citizen of the EU, I'm sure things can be different and we can learn again from each other.
Different, right?
So if you have examples, feel free to let me know as well. What I find that is very interesting and also contributes to this awareness about sustainability and small actions that we can do, there are simple things like apps that make things easier. For instance, apps that help you save a meal at the end of the day that would otherwise be thrown away by the restaurant or the supermarket, or having, for instance, bike sharing options throughout the city, or different mobility sharing options that put the focus on really this more collaborative economy in the efforts to use resources more efficiently. There are also all sorts of other small initiatives happening. For instance, the coffee shop around the corner nudging you to order your takeaway coffee in a reusable cup, not anymore the paper cups that you throw away afterwards. Now, I know that these are very small things, but I feel that all these little steps really contribute to changing a bit the way we think about our actions. And I would say this is a very good place to start as a citizen. And once you start, taking up more and more of these little changes in your daily habits, then you can start thinking bigger, which means getting more involved into your local community, asking more from your politicians, and making sure that your voice is heard. So I think it's really a stepwise approach, but we're getting there.
Thank you, Nadina. Like, so you mentioned about the voice and everything, and especially the youth day, working together to build the city like more, smart and also sustainable development in the city. So maybe you can give me a little bit, kind of like example that you have done before. So this is like one question that I want to know about in Europe. So can you give me an example about the citizen who working on the smart city?
This is a good question. I have to think just for a moment to make sure that I choose the right example. I think an interesting idea, for instance, that also combines a bit not only the public aspect, so what the public authorities are supposed to do, but also the private one. In the EU, there is a platform called Smart Cities Marketplace that aims to bring together investors with ideas to improve the way smart cities work. So I think this idea of a marketplace is quite interesting because it puts again the emphasis on the multitude of stakeholders that play a role in making our cities better. And this is something that can be also easily replicated in the end. So really solutions can come from a plethora of places. A lot of people can have good ideas. The important thing is to also have the resources to implement them. And within this, while thinking of resources, it's not only the public authorities who can provide the resources, but it's also investors who might see ideas as good to invest in and bring to fruition. So I'll stick with this example of the smart city marketplace.
Thank you, Nadina. I think like I never heard about the smart city marketplace, and then this is the first time for me heard about that, and I think it's really good platform. Not just maybe we can use that platform and to build in the other developing country to become the smart city. Okay, so like you are currently working for think tank based in Brazil, Belgium, and focusing on the EU policy. And how do you see the topic of smart city evolving in the EU, and what do you think we can learn from the EU experience?
Indeed, so smart cities have been quite an important topic in the EU, within the EU countries themselves, but also at the EU level as a concept supported by the European Commission through various initiatives. What is interesting for the EU context, and this is also something that perhaps could be transferred as knowledge to the extent possible to ASEAN as well, is that at the EU level, the European Commission, for instance, can better coordinate certain initiatives and can make sure that exchanges of best practices actually happen, and that cities can connect efficiently between one another to find out more about what has worked and what hasn't worked. So this is just the broader picture. Now, specifically going forward, what I see very interesting is that the concept of smart city is such a cross-cutting, cross-sectoral concept that it really brings together key aspects of the policy agenda right now. What has been very central lately within the EU is the concept of twin transition, meaning essentially that digital transformation of our society goes hand in hand with green and sustainable growth. So in this overarching topic of the twin transition, I see the smart cities also playing a very important role, because in the end, they are also right at the core of the transformation, really trying to tap the opportunities of digital technologies and also making sure that everything happens in a sustainable way. Going forward, I think that there are really a lot of discussions in the policy scene right now, where smart cities are playing a very important role. Well, the momentum is here. I think we just need to make sure that we make the right decisions over the next years.
Nadina, so back a little bit about your research. Since you are doing the research regarding about smart city and how can the citizens engage in this smart city, I want to know like why you're interested in this, because maybe you have something that pushes you about the green, or you want to contribute the impact with the smart city. May I know some about that?
Indeed. So there are also two ways to answer the question. For me, one will be the more professional, but also the more personal. I'll maybe start with the personal and then go to the professional. So I was born and raised in cities, and I feel myself at home in a city environment. So for myself as a citizen, personally, this is why I'm interested in smart cities, trying to see how, for myself, even life could become better on a day-to-day basis by really using up all the opportunities out there. Now, from the more professional side, I have been working quite a lot on the digitalization of the economy. And I see a lot of topics being brought together within this concept of smart cities. And I see a lot of potential being built up here. And this is why I chose within the EANGAGE fellowship program to focus on smart cities. Now, in addition to this, I also found very interesting the concept of our collaboration. So exchanging ideas between EU and ASEAN. I must confess, I still have a lot to learn about ASEAN. So I'm really happy about this collaboration. I believe also that the challenges that we face within the EU and ASEAN can be sometimes quite different. And exploring this topic of smart cities together with colleagues from ASEAN as well really struck me as a worthwhile thing to do for next year.
Thank you, Nadina. Thank you for sharing about your interest in terms of doing the research regarding about smart city. I have one last question to you, Nadina. Can you describe in maybe 1 or 2 minutes about your perspective, and of what smarter and more sustainable cities should look like in the next 20 years? Maybe like 20 or 30 years, like, so maybe we can talk like 2050, in 2050.
Okay, so for the next years, the way I see smart cities going, or where I would like smart cities to go, is that, well, essentially, I would see my daily life become more efficient, in the sense that, well, access to services, to public services, for instance, would be easier. The internet would facilitate all of this. but also a host of other things. So I would see smart cities using data and technology to make life easier and better, to make our city greener, our streets safer, for instance, and also in the end facilitate also access to perhaps better culture, promote better urban living spaces, and in the end also minimize all the hassle that we have in everyday life. So I think for me that's the key word, making life easier and better, but generally for everyone. So making sure that this is an inclusive transformation and one that really puts the focus on sustainability.
Thank you, Nadina. Thank you very much, Nadina. It's very good discussion, and thank you for joining us and coming together in a great discussion on and the future of the smart city and more sustainable and the security of our smart future city. And thank you to audiences who are watching us from live on Facebook, and see you next week. Please stay safe and take care. Bye bye.
Thank you very much.